Welcome to the Feria TechCast, where we'll bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today, we are joined by Dave Sobel, a leading expert in the delivery of technology service and the host of the top-rated Business of Tech podcast. With a background in computer science and over a decade of experience as the owner and operator of a successful managed service provider, Dave has lived the journey from technical expert to business leader, having both acquired companies and successfully sold his own. His deep on-the-ground experience in IT services, cybersecurity, and tech entrepreneurship is matched by his work at major software companies, where he led community marketing and product strategies. Now, through his podcasts and analysis, he provides thousands of listeners with critical insights into the IT market, trends, and the business acumen needed to build a career at the intersection of technology and business. So, Dave, welcome to the show.
Ezekiel, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Okay, wonderful. So, let's go to the beginning. So, take us back to the start. What actually inspired you to launch your own MSP, and what was the biggest lesson you learned from running it?
The biggest learn is how hard it is to run your own business. The content, you got to have some context for the time frame, right? So this was the late '90s and early 2000s, and I had I'd been working in a couple of small organizations, fresh out of university. Where I was building products and doing QA and doing consulting, a lot of really exciting work during that .com time. The last company I was at during that time, we were building what we would now call like a cloud service, online contract management system. But in February of 2002, the entire technical team was laid off because we had not been able to sell enough subscriptions to actually join it. And the basic premise was they were going to try and sell their way out of it. That if they could get a couple of contracts, they could hold the company together, and then they'd hire some more technical people. Well, what I learned as the technical people was the bosses keep their jobs. And so my kind of flippant early 20s, in age response was, well, I can run a company into the wall just as well as those guys can. So I decided I was going to take my stab at being an entrepreneur, and I went out to see if I could find companies that I would do their IT work for, that I would help out with. And we managed to land our first contract within about 60 days. And it was a sizable deal doing, management across cancer facilities across the DC metro area. And that was launched my business, and I started out from there.
Great. So, tell us, for the young engineers and students, how do you describe the business of tech, and why is it important for them to understand?
Well, so one of the things that I think many engineers don't always think about, particularly early in their career, is you have to get someone to buy the thing. Right? Like you don't we don't build things for the sake of building things. In business, there is a component of we have to convince the customer that this is worth doing and that they are worth parting with their hard-earned dollars to make it happen. And oftentimes engineers lose sight of that element of, hey, I've got to convince customers to buy these things. It has to be valuable. It has to solve their problem. We don't just build for that sake. Thus, I focus a lot on the idea of, what is the business side of what we're doing here? Why does it matter? What outcomes are we trying to get to? What problem are we trying to solve? What customer pain do we have? And how do we identify those things in order to be working on things that customers want? I always quip that, the best thing you can do is a customer will give you as many dollars as they can give you if they give you back $1.25. So, Mr. Customer, you spend this dollar, at the end you will have $1.25, and it's a cash printing machine, right? The customer will just fling out dollars at you if you think that way.
Interesting. So, tell us, Dave, what what is the biggest trend shaping the IT service market right now that new grads and youngsters coming into the tech space should actually be paying attention to?
It's got to be AI. I mean, it's clearly artificial intelligence, and what that means for what we're building right now. You know, if you listen to some of the tech press, you'll get the idea that everything is being automated away. I am not entirely convinced that that is that effective, nor that over time this will work. There's some data saying that many of the projects that are coming out are not successful. In fact, you know, Gartner is now talking about 95% of all projects are failing, mostly because they're not doing what I talked about just a moment ago. They're not tying the investment back to the outcome. Particularly those, you know, early in your career, there is a lot of potential risk right now of disruption of those entry level jobs by automation. But by the way, this has been true. We talk about it as a new thing. This has been true for multiple generations. We can go back, you know, even all the way back to the industrial time when automation was taking away entry level jobs. I think it's transformative. I think that what we're seeing right now is those that understand the technologies and can make them work and do things for businesses. That's actually a rare skill. So, for those that are earlier in their career, that continual focus on is what I'm doing relating back to this organization or my customers generating revenue, that lens will always work.
Amazing. So we talk about AI and automation taking some entry level roles. So tell us, are there any regulations in security or privacy that are creating new career opportunities in tech for people coming in?
Well, and particularly when you talk about security, the answer is most certainly. You know, that side of the house is very much an arms race. You know, because AI is amplifying both sides of the conflict. Let's always, we have to put security back into human terms. There are criminals trying to steal money from businesses and from individuals. That's what we're fighting. Right. We always talk about it in very generic terms like threat actors and nation state. No, there are people out there trying to steal your stuff. Right. That's what we're doing here. But on the other side, you know, you as the protector have to then also use the tools on your side to defend. Right. And so when we think about the criminals are using these same tools. They're getting better at social engineering. They're better at AI. They're better at deep fakes. You know, they can now fake voices. They can fake, you know, your physical appearance. You can show up on a video call and scam people out of money. So the defenders also have to use that. That is a side where both sides are continually upping their game to apply new technologies and techniques, and thus you've got to be focused there. Now, I think this is an area of continual opportunity. That's why we keep talking about cybersecurity as an opportunity. But remember my statement about tying it back to the business. This is the one area where this is harder to do because it's defensive rather than, you know, growth. When I like talking about technology, it's about where we can invest to get more, you know, that spend a dollar, get a $20.25 back. It's a little less satisfying to say you have to spend this dollar to protect the dollar you made. That's a little less satisfying, but that doesn't mean it's not valuable.
Wonderful. So, from your own vantage point, what's the real impact of big tech and its ethical decisions on smaller technology companies?
Yeah, we're living in a world where there's increasingly monopolistic behaviors. Particularly if you think about this from an advertising perspective. You know, in if we get in the DeLorean and you know Back to the Future and we go back in time a little bit, you know, there were multiple ways to get your message out to the world from an advertising perspective. You have lots of different ways. Now in the online world, there's really only two ways to get your message out: it's Google and Facebook. Right? If you really think about the way online advertising works, it's really those two players. They're both incredibly big tech players, and they're essentially imposing a tax on all businesses that if you want to advertise, well, you need to spend money with them. So the thing that I say, the big tech players are distinctly leveraging their position to be increasingly required to do business. We think about the way, you know, oftentimes deliver a cloud service now. Well, you kind of only have three options. You're kind of going with, you know, Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. That's kind of all you got. And so you have to think about this from the perspective of I tend to be a free market capitalist. I like competition. I like the ability for things to compete. And this is increasingly a world where that's less true. I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, particularly on the technology side, there are open source alternatives, there are smaller ones, but there's a reason why the big players are doing what they're doing. Some of the cloud computing investment is quite expensive. So from my perspective, big tech is now a layer that we have to think about that is less about providing competitive value and more about applying kind of a tax or getting their cut of everything that we do. It's a changing dynamic. I am encouraged by some of the governments that are starting to push back against that, particularly if we look at what the EU is doing. They're very focused on making sure that there is more competition among big tech. Let's be honest, many of the big tech companies are American, and the Europeans gain a lot less by having those American companies in their marketplaces. So they're much more willing to push back.
That was amazing. So tell us, what's a common misconception tech professionals have about the business side of running a tech company?
Well, the funny thing is they oftentimes think that it's not as important. Particularly more junior engineers or people that are less experienced often are very dismissive. Oh, the suits, the business guys, they're not the ones that think about it. But you have to remember that the finance side of what we do, the money and the business choices, that's the fuel that powers everything. You really have to think about the money and the revenue flow as the fuel that powers the business engine. And so the more that's happening, the more the engine works. And the less that's happening, the less the engine works. And so a good, particularly my advice for those junior engineers is to remember that understanding that side is a superpower. I will freely admit that for my own career, the ability to be able to do both technology, but also speak in plain English and plain words about the outcomes and the way that it impacts the business has been incredibly valuable to my career. And that joining of the two skills is really where the sweet spot is.
So you have successfully sold a business, yeah? And so tell us, what's one thing that always surprises people about selling a tech company?
That it is so much more about the people and the culture than it is about the spreadsheet. And
Oh,
what I mean
wow.
by that is when we do a lot of these deals, you think a lot about the money and the terms and how it's all going, and how it's all going to work. But ultimately, businesses are just groups of people. And what you really have to think about when you're both buying a business or selling your business is the impact on the people. And all of that is significantly harder than you think it's going to be. The culture choices, the people choices, the time spent with communication, all of that is way more important and far more difficult than you think it's going to be. And so I really would tell everyone, like, understand that portion of it is what's key. I will tell you that for me, when I look back at the sale of my MSP business, the reason that it was successful is how transparent we were about all of the terms and all of the people. We leaned very heavily into communicating everything rather than making it secret. And we focused on how are the people, how are our customers, how are our employees, how are the vendors, how everyone around us is going to view that deal. That made it successful by leaning into that.
Amazing. So, tell us a bit about your podcast, The Business of Tech, and the kind of conversations you have there. Like, tell us what does uh, a regular episode on The Business of Tech look like or sound like?
Well, every day, every business day, I take 3 to 4 stories and I cover them. And then I ask the question, why do we care? And I put it into context of what I think this is important. So, for example, we'll talk about developments of AI models or new cybersecurity threats or new product offerings from various companies. And then I ask, why do we care? And I break that down to understand the impact to it. So I cover the news, but then you also get my insights into why I think this is important or what questions it asks or how to be successful with it, with that eye of how does it impact the business or how does it impact outcomes or what are the consequences of this, so that you can be slightly more informed. There's so much going on that I want to act as a good filter and interpreter for those that are delivering IT and IT services. So I always say I want it to be the most valuable 10 minutes they spend a day. And then additionally, we spend some additional time on the weekends doing interviews so that you get a little bit more insight. As an IT person, you got to know a lot about a lot, right? And it's really hard. So I go out and I try and talk about interesting topics and things that I think are going to be useful to the space to bring those alternative perspectives. So that's what's on the show. It's every business day we're delivering some business news, and on your weekends you get a little bit of big thoughts in terms of bringing in experts from the outside.
Wonderful. So tell us, how has hosting the Business of Tech podcast changed your own perspective of the tech industry?
well, it's I certainly have tried to have a lot more alternative views on that. One of the things that I've come to very much the conclusion in covering the space is that there isn't one answer. Particularly engineers really love the idea of there being one answer, right? Right? There is a way to do it. But what I really come to understand and lean into with my coverage on the business of tech is there's actually multiple ways to do it. And what we need to do is we need to analyze the pros and cons of the different approaches and find out which approach works best for you in your situation, knowing that every business's situation is a little bit different, and thus we interpret it a little differently. So that's the piece that I do. I like to do strategy breakdowns because I like to understand the why of people's strategies so that we can replicate that strategy when it's useful.
That sounds great. So tell us, for someone starting their career in tech today, what would you recommend? Joining a large tech firm or a smaller service company? Or I just want to hear your thoughts about this. What do you think is a better career path today?
So I've got a video all about this because again, see my last answer that there's different answers for different people, but broadly, I tend to think, particularly earlier in your career, the more you can lean into large organizations and actually gain success as a collective, that actually has a lot of long-term success. If you think about like, corporations and companies, long term, they've been one of the most valuable ways to generate wealth for individuals over time, but it's a skill to be able to be good in those large organizations. So when you're young and earlier in your career, give it a try. Right? I would say like that is worth learning because even if it isn't a great match for you, you're going to learn a lot. Know that I am definitely encouraging of entrepreneurs. You need to understand your why. Why does this thing exist? And it's not just I need to have a job and I need to make money, right? It is what value are you delivering that someone else is going to give you money for? When you solve that and you understand that why, everything does fall into place. So I would tell you for those early in your career, if you can lean into something, a large organization to learn a lot. And over time, you'll identify the things that say, oh, I have identified a problem. I know how to solve it. And most importantly, I believe it's valuable enough that other people will give me cash to, to fix that problem.
Great. So you emphasize on entrepreneurs needing to understand the whys. So could you maybe be more elaborate about the steps to take to actually get to understand the whys?
Ultimately, it's actually both complicated and incredibly simple, right? It really does boil down to the simple question of why. Think, when you were little and you remember when you'd keep asking your parents, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Sometimes it's just the process is kind of that simple. Why should I do this? And then you answer it and you ask why again and why again. And you keep pressing to make sure you understand the core value. Again, see my earlier illustration. I was talking about the idea of like, hey, Mr. Customer, we're going to defend you against cyber threats. Well, why do I need that? Well, because let's talk about the threat actors that are out there and who they're targeting. Well, I don't think I'm not the kind of company that would get targeted. Well, let's understand what they're looking for. They're not looking at you specifically, they're looking at you broadly, and you're on the internet. Like you walk through each of that to understand the real why. Ultimately, in that example, the why is I want you to keep your money. I would rather we spend smaller amounts on defense than larger amounts on recovery later. That's the why. Like that's what we're trying to get at. And the customer goes, "Oh, okay, I understand that difference." And so ultimately the process is working through on the situation, understanding what is the core value to the customer that they, why should I give money in exchange for this service or in exchange for this product? What's the outcome I'm going to get? Determining that. And often it is just as simple as keep asking why.
Wow. That's quite a great one there. So, tell us, what does a typical career path look like for someone who wants to excel at the intersection of tech and business?
Well, if only I knew what a typical career looked like, because I don't ever think mine has been typical at all. So I can't speak from personal experience to say like what a typical one would look like. I always identify understand what it is you're doing and what the value you're delivering to your employer and what the value they're delivering to you is. And by the way, it's a little bit more than just a paycheck. Although we have to understand that paychecks are required. See my earlier comments about fuel of business, money is also fuel of life, right? You need money and resources to have a home, to feed yourself, to have long-term stability, happiness for your family, all of those kinds of things. But then when we put that aside, what is the mutual agreement we have here at this employment? Hey, they're getting my services that solve this problem. I'm getting experience in X, Y, and Z to allow us to continue to grow. Like, where is that pairing? When that balance gets offset and it's no longer working, you either re-examine with the employer. Maybe you need a new job, maybe you need to talk to your boss about change of responsibility, maybe you want to move up the food chain, whatever that is. Or then you look externally and you continue to think about that. I oftentimes sort of say, like, I don't necessarily think you have to plan out every single step in your career. It's the same philosophy I have for running a business. I want to know what I'm doing this quarter, and then I want to know directionally where I'm trying to go. And if what I'm doing this quarter aligns with where I want to go, I'm on track. And then next quarter, I'm going to do the same exercise. Am I moving in the right direction toward my end goal? And I'll keep working the plan. And every quarter, I look at it that way. And every time, I keep moving in the right direction.
Great. So, tell us, Dave, what's one valuable piece of business advice that you receive or probably learned by yourself as a technical founder that you still use today?
Really good question. I tended Bob Berg wrote a book that I'll recommend for everyone called The Go Giver. And it's a parable. It's a really easy business read. The one that I think about a lot is deliver more in value than you are compensated in. I think about that a lot. That if you're always delivering more in value than what you're receiving back in compensation, you will always do well, because you will always be perceived as worth everything that people are spending with you. Be that in your employment, right? Like you want to deliver more than you're getting back in pay. It's okay. That's the way it works. If you're a business, deliver more than what they're paying for you. They will always be happy with that. Deliver more as a person, right? Like go out and do more than you can than you may receive back. That's okay, right? Because by the way, if everyone is doing that, the world gets a little bit better. And so if you think about it in those terms, like that's the most valuable lesson I've ever thought about is not worrying about what I'm getting paid, but thinking a lot more about what I'm delivering in value. That has always served me well. And it's what I would tell anyone young in this career path. Think about that. You'll be very successful.
Wow, that is some great advice. So tell us, Dave, based on your analysis or maybe the way you view things right now, tell us what's the most undervalued or overlooked role in the IT service sector right now?
Business analyst, right? And what I mean by that is like there's a real need for people that not only understand technology but that can link that back to business need, and that's that business analysis side. There's not nearly enough of that. Um, I don't want. I have incredible respect for those that write code and implement and such. I'm a former person doing that myself. But the real value is not just the ability to do that, but also to make it relevant for your end customers. So I think for me, that business analysis side is the undervalued skill that there's not nearly enough of and not nearly talked about enough. Again, we're in a bit of an AI craze. Everyone's looking for AI skills. It's like, yeah, but I don't need just AI skills. I actually need someone who understands the impact of that technology and will make good choices around it. That's the person that's really valuable.
Amazing. So, I have one more question for you. So, there's this last question I normally like to ask every guest that I interview here on this podcast. So, tell us, what does innovation mean to you, and how does it relate to your field? I mean, in the context of tech service and business.
Everyone throws around the word innovation all the time, and in fact, it makes me angry a little bit too because every press release I reel now, people list this latest innovation. And usually, it's just a new feature. It's just a new thing. I look at innovation as a really rare thing where you have truly created something new that is not immediately obvious. And that's the way that I think about it is that the real innovation, like if we think about the mobile conversion, right? The real innovation was the combination of touch technology with cellular technology, with camera technology, with GPS technology, and it was the vision to put it together in a way that it made it accessible for users to use these pieces all together. That was really insightful. The combination, the ability, cloud innovate, the idea of, hey, we're going to take all of this computing and we're going to abstract it away. That was a real innovation. And we are real cavalier right now about using that word. I tend to think real innovation is kind of rare. It doesn't happen all the time. And I like to, so for me, the definition is something truly unique that combines things in a way that other people did not see, that was not immediately obvious, that unlocks a lot of value for others.
Wow, that's interesting. So, finally, Dave, tell us, where can listeners follow your work, or tune into your podcast, The Business of Tech?
Well, I make it really easy. Everything is on my website at businessof.tech is the website. There's links to everywhere. You can follow me on your favorite podcast platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all of the different platforms. You can follow me on YouTube. We put everything up as video versions. You can subscribe to the newsletters. Everything is at businessof.tech is the website. You can sign up right there. And actually, Ezekiel, you'll be the first to know we're going to be launching some new membership only options. So you'll be able to get additional content right through the website.
Oh, wow, that's great. Dave, it's been a really wonderful conversation with you today, and I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a fun conversation, and I really appreciated you inviting me on.